You are listening to the Visualising War and Peace podcast. In each episode, we look at how people have experienced, described, or imagined armed conflict in different periods and places, and we discuss the impact which representations of war and peace can have on us as individuals and societies. My name's Teddy Henderson, and I'm currently a student on the Visualising Peace module. Today I'm joined by Lt Col Henderson and Maj McCord. Firstly, welcome to the podcast. I will hand over to them now to introduce themselves, and thank you very much for your time, Lt Col.
No, thank you very much for having me. As you said, Graham Henderson, and I'm the commanding officer at the Aberdeen and Tayforth Officer Training Regiment at the moment. So effectively, university officer training spread from Aberdeen to Stirling to Dundee and including St Andrews University as well. And what we do is offer students at the universities an opportunity to get an experience of what life in the military could be like, whilst giving them hopefully some valuable leadership experience to take forward in their careers, whether they do choose to join the army as a regular or reserve officer, or even as a soldier, or indeed if they choose not to, at least they'll be going on to their futures in modern society as hopefully better leaders, but with a good knowledge of what the army does, how it does it, and as proponents of us into the future as well.
Maj McCord.
Hi, I'm Major Lt McCord. My current appointment is that of the Officer Commanding of A Squadron of Tayforth University Officer Training Corps, which is a subunit of ATOTR as a commanding officer, as rightly mentioned. I've had this appointment for 5 years. It's a reserve appointment, so it's a part-time appointment, which again I've held for 5 years. Prior to that, I served 38 years in the regular army, serving as a private soldier right through to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. With regards to peace operations, I've served in numerous peace support operations, which have included 3 tours of Northern Ireland during the Troubles in the 80s. Arguably, you may suggest that as a counterinsurgency operation. However, there was a significant amount of peace support in all of that. I've also served with the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus in 1988, with Grapple, which was the UK's contribution in Bosnia in 1996, serving in Kupres and Sarajevo, and also an initial deployment to Kabul following the events of 9/11 as part of the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, in late 2001.
Thank you, Major. Lt Col, perhaps you could run us through some of the operations which you've been a part of.
Yeah, so probably not as extensive as Joe, but certainly some experience, particularly in peace support operations, and particularly building partner capacity, which probably sort of the latter stages of peace support operations as we might see them. But sort of early years included operational tools in Bosnia, effectively very much a peace support operation at that stage, and then again counterinsurgency operations in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Albeit in Iraq, I had the privilege of operating in a mentoring, advising and accompanying role, so effectively that building partner capacity in Afghanistan whilst on the staff, certainly supporting the transition to Afghan National Army lead for the operations there. So again, building that capacity within them, if you like. And then also deployments in Somalia, supporting the building of capacity within the Somali National Army, and also then on Al-Shader, which was the operation later on post the Daesh offensive in Iraq, so it focused on Iraq and Syria, but helping to build capacity within the nascent Iraqi Special Forces capability that had just been built. So again, like I say, some of those counterinsurgency, but certainly focused on the bringing of stability and building of partner forces to support host nation forces to be able to deliver peace themselves.
Great, thank you both. Definitely a wide range of experience that we can draw on today. So firstly, I was wondering, Major McCord, if you have any experiences or stories from your experiences from peace operations where it seemed like you were directly helping to build peace in the community.
Yeah, with 38 years service, we've got many stories and many experiences. I'll try and capture the key ones, the standouts, if you like, for me. First of all, Northern Ireland. I think Northern Ireland was so close to home, especially my first deployment as a young 18-year-old private soldier working, operating in Belfast. It was a complete shock, I have to say, because it was part of the United Kingdom. English-speaking individuals, very territorial, and I kind of grew up very quickly in that kind of scenario. So, yes, peace support, probably not. But trying to bring peace, absolutely yes, and we can unpack that as we move through. Then Bosnia, I think Bosnia for me was significant because by this time you've got 24/7 newscasts, you've got Sky News on the positions as things happen. And as we were leading up to the deployment, we could see it unfolding, we could see what was going on. It kind of struck various chords, concerns, nervousness, as we've seen that situation play out. Again, not a million miles away from these shores in Central Europe. I remember watching the Olympic Games in Sarajevo where Col Henderson won the gold medal. And here we were about to deploy out there to try and bring peace and stability to what was a horrendous situation. Ethnic cleansing, tribal warfare, displaced persons, it was all going on. So again, standouts, Northern Ireland in the 80s and Bosnia in the mid-90s. But again, I think later on we could unpack a bit more detail some of those experiences.
Lovely, thank you. And Lieutenant Colonel?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? All experiences are a bit different. So I suppose it's easier to remember those things nearer to you than further away. And my most recent experiences were deployment in Iraq, supporting the Iraqi Special Forces, and also then in Somalia as well. And I suppose the big things there were, that assisting effectively a partner and helping to build capacity within them, and being able to see them developing and taking more on, and actually being able to sort of go out and make a change themselves, and seeing those tangible benefits was certainly beneficial, and kind of it helped all of us realise that what we were doing was of benefit to both the armed force we were working with, but the communities that they were supporting as well. But even looking further back, I suppose, in Bosnia, we did a lot of work supporting the police force there in terms of advising and helping them to both police and deliver effective police in the communities, but also to help them with the recovery of a lot of the weapons and ammunition that had been left behind following the war, which clearly a lot of people had actually warned for fear of another war breaking out, and it was that ability to go out and help them and be seen in the community to be helping, and actually that unlocking of the community understanding the police were in a position to provide a safe and secure environment for the people, and therefore their willingness to give up some of those munition and arms that they had been sort of stored over time. And you can see those differences definitely allows you to understand that we are making a difference here. We're contributing to a greater good, which is always key.
And that touches on some of the literature which I've read around the strategies of peace operations and disarmament as a key part of that. And so I was wondering if you could outline how the military goes around disarmament operations.
I suppose it's quite a tricky one, because of course it depends on who's in the lead. Is this an operation that we, for example, as the British Armed Forces, are leading and therefore taking a role in that disarmament process, or doing it as part of a coalition? I suppose you could argue that there was a bit of that in Iraq post 2003, in terms of, like I say, sort of disarming the armed forces and the security infrastructure there to then help rebuild it from scratch. And there can be counter argument to that, is that, well, why would you disarm an armed force? If you have to build it from scratch again, why can't you just help work with it? The situation will depend. Is this a war? Is it not? How have we been drawn into to intervene? Or are we there to support? So I suppose for me, the big question you would always ask, focused on peace support operations, but also building partner capacity within that, is how does this end? Because what is the end state? How do we get to that end state? And in my perspective, that would be a self-sustaining, force-generating, capable force, able to deliver a safe and secure environment to the people of that land. So it's ensuring that we are helping to deliver that. And like I say, disarmament might not necessarily be a part of that. It may well be, but it may be effectively just clearing up the arms and ammunition that have been left post the war, and that's then assisting, and we bring those capabilities like explosive ordnance disposal and ammunition technical officers and people like that can help with clearing all that up and making the place safe again. But also, how can we make that sustaining longer term? Well, do we need to train the local force, to be able to do those things themselves? Because of course we can't just keep doing it forever.
Yeah.
So I think that's the key thing, is coming into it with the knowledge of how do we make this end. It's almost trying to buy yourself out of the operation from the outset, because otherwise you're going to get entangled in it forever. And
definitely situationally dependent.
Absolutely. Absolutely situationally dependent, and I guess political to a degree as well, because what is the political architecture asking for whether it be from the nation at war or our own sort of political masters as well, to make sure that we're there to support whatever it is that is agreed upon and requested.
Thank you. So my next question is about how the military has been perceived by locals in the various operations which you've been on. Major McCord, perhaps you've got something to add.
For me, I remember vividly when we first went to Kabul, the Afghan locals were throwing flowers onto the bonnets of a Land Rover. They were offering us chai, tea. Some of the key leaders, if you like, key players, wanted to sit down and serve supper to us. Myself, I was Regiment St Mary's at the time, so I was the senior soldier in the regiment. I would move around with the commanding officer in a soft-skin vehicle all around Kabul, just in one vehicle, one Land Rover with the commanding officer, engaging with the people, engaging with contractors, trying to get, as the commanding officer alluded to, host nation support, get them to start working for themselves after the fall of the Taliban, wearing a beret, no protection apart from a sidearm, and the people were just amazing. And Afghanistan people were just fantastic, as they always have been throughout these campaigns. So we talk about, were they glad to see us? Well, absolutely glad to see us. The children were playing in the streets, the kites were flying again, as the Taliban had banned kite flying. They were playing cricket, etc., etc. So as that conflict operation evolved, then clearly things took on a different tack. But certainly that initial, and don't forget we were there two months after 9/11, so things were still quite raw from a world perspective. But the people in Afghanistan, Kabul, in detail, were really happy to see us. So yeah, that's certainly one that resonates with me and sticks with me.
And something which I found is the importance of that local perception, which I thought you might also have something to say about, in how that helps with the success of the operation, or how that changes the course of the operation.
Yeah, I remember the brigade commander at the time, his struggling with the people are the prize. We need to win the hearts and minds of the people. Go back and do counterinsurgency. It was very much hearts and minds. They needed to see us and view us as a force for good, which in the interim they absolutely seen as a force for good. We made lots of promises during those initial stages. Did we deliver on those promises? Question mark. Perhaps some, not all. But certainly we went in there not expecting to fire a shot, and we didn't. Surprisingly, for the first 2 or 3 months, we did not fire a single shot, and we were making a significant difference.
To echo some of what Joe said there, actually, I mean, that sort of, winning the hearts and minds is clearly is a critical and fundamental part to counterinsurgency operations, and then bringing stability there afterwards. And I think that the mantra that the military uses quite regularly is first do no harm, and I think that's an absolute critical bit with maintaining that local, at least perceived support, because if mistakes are made, whether intentionally or not, and that has an impact on the local population, harm is therefore done, and that reputation or damage is arguably irreversible. And that is when you start to degrade the trust with the locals with what it is you're doing, and it becomes even then harder to regain that. So it's about the maintenance of that trust and their understanding that you are there as a force for good, and there to help deliver that safe, secure, and peaceful environment.
Definitely. And to build on that, I was wondering if there's any formal strategy or training to try and ensure the positive perception of the military by the locals.
So I think there's a lot of training we do, and obviously first and foremost, I guess, as an army, what is our purpose? It's absolutely there to protect the nation, whether that be home or abroad. So there is a need to be able to conduct full-scale warfighting, and that is, if you like, the top end of the scale, and that's what we generically train to do. However, when specific operations come about, whether they be peace support, warfighting, counterinsurgency, we have the ability to then turn on the training beast within our forces to deliver bespoke pre-deployment packages that help people to be able to better understand the nuances of the environment that they're going into, and to then deliver against that. And that can be from rules of engagement training, for specific events that we may need to conduct, all the way to low-level tactics, techniques, and procedures that would have to be conducted at the tactical level. And that training will be available strategic level down, and it's delivered at various levels throughout defence to achieve that and ensure that people do deploy in these operations with the right toolbox of knowledge that they need to conduct the activities within the sphere they're given.
Great, thank you. So next I was wondering if there's one experience or one example of a military peace operation which stands out to you as successful.
For me, absolutely Bosnia. The command officers mentioned a lot of the detail about peace support operations. But when we first moved in, we think we're setting the conditions for success downstream. In Bosnia, we could see success being delivered there and then, at point of contact, to use the contact phrase. We're delivering aid, humanitarian aid, we're moving people around, giving them housing, etc., etc. So we're making a significant difference in a short space of time. So much so that I've actually been back to Sarajevo on holiday with my wife. It's just a fantastic city. It's a fantastic country, and it's just vibrant. It's multicultural. It's cosmopolitan. It's a holiday destination. Do I see myself going back to Afghanistan with my wife on holiday anytime soon? Absolutely not. So there's a long answer to a short question. Bosnia for me was a significant success, and we've seen that success delivered very quickly.
Lieutenant Colonel.
I suppose it's tricky though, because we need to define success.
Yeah.
And success will be different in every operational theatre. So to sort of nail one specific operation as successful is tricky, because are we talking about the successes you may achieve at the tactical level, or even at the operational, or even the strategic political level? And those successes may be fundamentally different at each of those levels. They will all amount to something, but it's about clearly articulating what is actually success, and therefore how do we see it? And that success may be very time limited. It may be successful now and look very good, but who's to say in 5, 10, 15 years that all that success will be reversed or built upon, and suddenly we'll look back and go, that was far more successful than we ever could have imagined. So I guess it needs to be taken as a snapshot in time, and probably better defined, because it will be viewed through different lenses. Is the success that I may see might be different to the local population of an area that we've been operating in, versus how the international stage may see it in years to come. So that's quite a tricky one to answer, but I think it's broad, but can be viewed through so many different lenses.
Yeah, and that's something which you've alluded to, is perhaps sometimes it's a small success or a temporary success, and which is something we talk about in the project, is pockets of peace, and peace as a process and something which has to constantly be worked for. So perhaps to reframe the question, is there an operation which you think has led to the most sustainable long-term peace, or potential for sustainable long-term peace?
Yeah, so I think that the international community's efforts in Bosnia, certainly that seems to have brought about a lot, sort of a sustainable solution internally to the nation, which seems to be holding true to now. I mean, they're knocking on the door of EU membership and everything as well. So I guess you can see how that long term has played out. And to a degree as well, Northern Ireland, I think we could argue there are some successes there, but there will always be differences and difficulties though. And again, not everyone will agree with that view, but I think that the fact that the violence, certainly in the complexity and the amount of it, and it happening outside of Northern Ireland, is perhaps a mark of some success. I'm sure Tony Blair would say that the Good Friday agreements were an absolute success.
So I guess further from that, is there something you could perhaps pinpoint as leading to more of a successful operation, or leading to the downfall of an operation?
Well, if you go back to that initial expeditionary move into Kabul at the fall of the Taliban, again, in my opinion, we were making lots of promises, some of which we could deliver and some of which we were never going to deliver. Those false promises, I think, should have, perhaps did cost us dearly as the operation endured. Not forgetting that we didn't stick around Kabul big numbers for too long after the fall of Taliban. We kind of moved away from that. Again, the commanding officer could probably give us a bit more context. So we kind of refocused or moved focus away from Afghanistan and moved back into Iraq as a major deployment. Perhaps we took the eye off the ball of Afghanistan to concentrate and focus on what was going on in Iraq. And during that time, perhaps Afghanistan, Kabul, in the main, become unstable again.
You sort of go on your operations, don't you? And you may start at full-scale warfighting, but you always want to get to what's often referred to as That's stage 4, which is the stabilisation bit of the operation and how you bring that about. But of course, if you get the building blocks wrong on the way to that, it becomes so much harder to bring stability and peace. And I think if we were to look back on some of the lessons from certainly the British military's involvement in Optelic in Iraq, the dismantling of the security infrastructure up front in terms of the complete removal of the armed forces and the police, and then trying to re-establish those. It didn't go that well, and perhaps we moved at timelines that were somewhat unrealistic, and therefore didn't have that security infrastructure back in place in as well and as good a position as it could have been to actually just take it on themselves and run with it. And consequently, we saw the reinsertion of our own troops into Basra to re-help effectively the armed forces that were there, and just help sort of mentor and train them to be able to take full responsibility going forward. So yeah, there is absolutely the opportunity always for it to go wrong and not be as successful as you may want. So it's about just understanding what is it we're trying to achieve and how we're going to get there, and then sticking to that, but adjusting accordingly.
And you mentioned the stages of operations. I was wondering if you could outline for the listener some of the operational actions which take place in military intervention in peace operations.
Like I say, in terms of peace operations particularly, obviously you're going to look at stability and security sector reform, delivering those effects as quickly as possible. But it may be just quite simply monitoring, like we do in Cyprus at the moment. It is absolutely supporting the UN mission, which is just monitoring there, and obviously that leads to protection of civilians as well. But it does depend on what have you done? Has it been full scale warfighting to start with, and then are we preparing back to rebuild and re-establish, and therefore lead to stabilisation operations, which are all part of that peace support element? Is it peace support or is it peace enforcement as well? So there's a balance to be struck, an understanding that needs to be gained as to what exactly you're delivering, to be able to then bring about that stability that's needed.
And there's definitely no one-size-fits-all peace operation.
No, certainly. I mean, we've definitely got doctrine, which is our handrail that tells us how we would conduct peace support operations. But again, that plays into that toolbox of things and knowledge that we need to then be able to then adjust accordingly to deliver the effects that might be asked to deliver, whether that be politically or strategically, and then use that as our handrail, the book to lean on that then takes us through to successful conclusion of operation.
Thank you. So I was also wondering how the military has adapted to the changing landscape of wars, which is including nowadays cyber warfare and trying to maintain peace in the cyber realm, as well as fighting wars in the cyber realm, but also just on land as well, the changing landscape of wars, if you could touch on any of that.
Yes, I suppose we have to have a multi-domain focus on what we're doing, whether that be land, sea, air, cyber or space. That's one of the 5 main domains we talk about in the multi-domain sphere. And so a lot of that, I guess, is starting to be adopted into both our education, but also in terms of our structures. As you know, military, we've got the Army, land, the Air Force, air, Navy, sea. We've got, the Space Command, and also there are now cyber elements entwined within those organisations as well, to be able to deal with that multi-domain, sort of complex environment we're now faced with. And then I guess, within that is then the building of capabilities to be able to do stuff in those domains as well. And that's certainly what our strategic thinkers will be looking at and what they will be working on to ensure that those capabilities can be used, fused, and brought to best effect by each of the other domains themselves.
Yeah, I don't think I'd add to that. As a reservist as I am now, I'm not as well informed as the commanding officers now because of accessibility to what's going on out there. But again, as a reservist, just looking at the news and looking at seeing what's happening in the Middle East with artificial intelligence, drones, cyber, as you mentioned, what's happening on the ground, the future character of conflict, it's a never-changing landscape, absolutely. Yeah, it certainly causes sleepless nights, that's for sure.
And that's also something which has to be included as fighting the public image battle or the publicity and media battle in wars.
That's a fair comment, yeah. Yeah, what's true, what's not true.
Yeah, it comes back to that point of first do no harm. It's be first with the truth as well, because at the end of the day, we are absolutely operating in the public eye. whichever way you try and cut it, the media are there, the world is watching everything we do now. When we did Operation Pitting, the withdrawal of the entire personnel from Kabul, that what was being done was being played back to you immediately on the newsreels. In the operations rooms, we had the news on, and we could see exactly what was going on the ground, in the moment, because it was live feeds and that was coming to you direct. So it is absolutely key that we need to make sure that our training is absolutely fit for purpose, that our leaders are best equipped to deal with some of the complexities of modern day, the current character of conflict that keeps evolving, but also understanding how they bring all the capabilities that are available to them to bear to best effect, but in as humane and appropriate manner as possible always. Because I think that's kind of, again, it plays back to that you could lose your reputation in a moment through mistakes, and it's about trying to make sure that where there have been honest mistakes made, clearly we must be honest about that, and because the truth will just be known, because like I say, that the media will have that available to them. So it's just making sure that is the case, but best preparing our people to be able to operate in that complex and evolving character environment.
Thank you. So in a link to the changing landscape of wars, I was wondering if you think there's been a changing expectation on soldiers and officers. Particularly, I think for me, the changing landscape of wars includes a high proportion of operations in the prevention sphere or the conflict containment protection in other countries. So whether the training of troops has also adapted to deal with that kind of thing.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's, with the character of conflict evolving at such pace constantly, the need to invest in that, particularly our junior leadership, is ever more important. And I think we can see that, with Project Adair taking place at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst at the moment. They're reviewing the commissioning course, the content, the delivery of it, and therefore what extra tools do our junior leaders need to have available to them, and what understanding, whether it be combined arms manoeuvre, the use of artificial intelligence, the use of drones, what activities can be done in the cybersphere, and maybe not necessarily operating with those capabilities, but having an understanding of their existence, their abilities, and how they can integrate them to deliver the best possible effects, and whether that be full-scale warfighting or again to deliver peaceful or sort of resolution type activities as well.
If we drill that down to our lowest common denominator, our private soldiers, they're driven by using standards. As the kind was mentioned before about holding people to account and being aware of a situation, aware of our surroundings. Valuing standards give us the platform for private soldiers to be aware of that all the time. Courage, discipline, respect for others, integrity, service commitment. At that level, as long as those soldiers understand that and deliver that, then we are in a good place.
I guess that links to the culture in the army as well, and the importance of that in operations.
Absolutely, yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt, we're held to account, and rightly so. If I go back to my experiences in Northern Ireland in the 80s, we're still going through trials through court of individuals who did things that weren't what they were designed or asked to do. I'm sure you can understand some examples of that, because they didn't have those valuing standards that we hold so dearly as we do now.
Definitely. And that also links to, for example, UN peacekeeping operations and having to work alongside lots of other troops from different countries. And I was wondering if there was ever any differences in culture or differences in how they handled the operation, which made things perhaps a bit difficult.
Yeah, again, for me, the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus, we worked alongside the Danes, the Swedish, the Canadians, and also the Argentinians. We were working on operations, albeit peacekeeping operation in the buffer zone, working side by side with the Argentinian army. Again, you can think about the Falkland Islands and the dispute that's still going on regarding the Falkland Islands. They didn't even mention it. It wasn't even a topic of discussion. We were there to patrol the buffer zone and maintain that peace line between the Greek separates and the Turkish separates.
And then on the organisational side of that, having to coordinate between lots of different groups, perhaps maybe not the most efficient way of doing things.
I suppose it depends, as you're saying, it's like a UN or coalition type operation, I guess. You are all there with a common purpose. but there's a common goal that you're trying to achieve. So that is what will drive you all forward. And then I suppose from a British military perspective, as Joe said, our core values and standards will assist us. And that courage, discipline, respect for others, integrity, loyalty, selfless commitment. Those sort of things they're sort of drilled into us, and they're a means by which we operate, and they allow us to actually integrate better with others through good humility and understanding. And again, our training can be blended to help us understand how to operate with other nations and organisations as well, just to ensure that we do approach it with the right empathy and understanding to be able to operate together. Like I say, that common purpose goal, selection and maintenance of aim, the sort of key principle of war will ensure that we're all pulling in the same direction and operating together to achieve those aims.
So I guess that there's some positives to be taken from working together with multiple countries and organisations. Then,
yeah, absolutely, and I think it gives you exposure to how other cultures live, breathe, operate, and that's what's interesting, isn't it? I think that sort of certainly makes us better people through that understanding, and gives us the ability to help educate others about the cultures and ways of other nations and people and how they operate, to ensure that any faux pas or any failings that we might have had in our time aren't experienced by others. They learn from that and they go forward, even closer and better.
Yeah, it's a great point about learning lessons and continually improving things too.
Yeah, I mean that's something we're very good at, actually, particularly in the British military, is that on operational cycles, certainly when we were campaigning in Iraq and Afghanistan, was that taking the force that had been in the theatre to help train the next force as well, so that those lessons, the live lessons they were learning on a day-to-day basis, were being fed directly into the training of the people that were coming next, so that they wouldn't have to start from scratch. Everyone was learning from one another and going forward in the right direction.
Thank you. I was wondering if you think, to link back to previous questions about the training of individuals, do you think that there's enough geopolitical training for military leaders?
There is certainly a lot throughout a career in the military. You would certainly, as an officer, so to junior leader, if you like, you do geopolitical studies at Sandhurst, and then that carries on throughout your career and the touch points of education that you do. When you go to go formal staff training, whether that be intermediate command staff college or even advanced command staff college, that you will do the geopolitical studies. And again, into the higher command, sort of high college studies that individuals may do, certainly, in pre-deployment training, geopolitical considerations will be factored in. So I think everyone is given a good awareness and understanding of it throughout their career. And I suppose as well, some of it will be born out of what jobs you do. We do have some people who will go away and do jobs with the stabilisation unit as part of the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, as an example, and they'll probably come with a greater geopolitical understanding of those sort of operations. There's certainly a wealth to draw on from across the experience you can gain in a career. And I would say some people will gather a lot of that along the way through actually doing operations like this.
I think the brigade HQ level, formation HQ level, the brigade commander's got his political advisors sat by him, his PO lad, and he will take direct consultation with his PO lad, who's linking directly back to UK. If that's correct. So
yeah, exactly. So you still have those policy advisors who can link into the sort of strategic sort of headquarters level to get that greater geopolitical sort of picture to feed back into the force as well.
A lot of actors going on to make these operations happen.
Yeah, they're no small thing. They are large operations. They've often seen large headquarters sitting above them to deliver the effect, and then and those are replicated, whether that be a tactical level command forward delivering the operation, or the operational level sort of command operating out of permanent joint headquarters in the UK, which then links back into the Ministry of Defence as well at the strategic political level to ensure that there's the correct passage of information and decision making up and down. Yeah.
If you could explain the role of a cultural advisor to the listeners, perhaps.
Yeah, so I suppose a cultural advisor, so from a British military perspective, we do develop a cultural advisor capability. And that can be at a lower level by having a language specialist who understands not just the language, but some of the culture of the organisation, and that person can deploy then alongside a force with that capability. Or it could be an actual holistic cultural advisor whereby they have studied and learned to understand the cultural nuances of a nation, of a people, of an area, and can then either inject that into training so people themselves understand it better, or even deploy alongside armed forces to continually give that cultural advice and ensure that whatever sensitivities and nuances might need to be known about and understood there. Like I say, so it could be linguistic, it could just be holistic cultural advice, and like I say, we do build that capability. And again, that plays back to, like I say, about pre-deployment training. So we might train for all that war, and we then switch focus to train for a specific operation. That's when those cultural advisors and sort of linguist capabilities will feed into your training and then be available on your deployment as well. So we have access to that.
And it will definitely help in the success of the mission and the importance of understanding the culture, as we talked about.
I mean, a lot of the places we go will be unfamiliar to us. We may know about them, we may know of them, we may think we understand, but there will always be little differences and certainly nuances that we may not be fully aware of. And there could be regional differences in a country and views as well. One country to the next country may be fundamentally different in their outlook and their cultural views, and therefore it's understanding that. And that first do no harm. If we understand those things, we're already ahead of the game. Then we can actually have greater access to the local population and show that sort of empathy and understanding with them from the outset and going forward.
We should never forget the British Army is a multicultural organisation. We have Muslim, Hindu, Jew, Christian, Sikh, Pakistan, all within our ranks. And I remember looking at, I know the Prime Officer was heavily involved in the operation to the evacuation of Kabul a couple of 3 years ago. One of the private soldiers from the 2nd Battalion Parachute Regiment was actually born and raised in Kabul, who served as a paratrooper in two para, who stood in the walls outside the hotel, speaking to the people, the Afghan people who were trying to get themselves on flights. He played a crucial part in the success of that operation. So again, we are a multicultural organisation from within.
Thank you. So a bit of a different question now. There's lots of studies which show the importance of involving females in bottom-up grassroots peace building and reconciliation practices. And I was wondering what you thought about the importance of women in the military in these peace building operations.
I was fortunate to be given the opportunity, the privilege to command a rifle company of Royal Marines in Afghanistan, arguably not peacekeeping per se, but having a significant peacekeeping capacity role. My CMT, my combat medical technician, was a naval female CMT. She bared arms. She carried the heaviest burden in all the patrols because I didn't have medical supplies and ammunition, water, etc. But she brought so much to the patrol. It was unreal. She could read atmospherics better than any of the Marines could, and certainly perhaps I could also. She noticed when there was no children playing in the streets before any of the blokes did. She would notice the female that she'd seen every patrol stood a certain way, not there, or turning away and walking away from her, who would normally approach her and speak to her, because Afghan females will not speak to males for various cultural reasons. Not only that, she was a good soldier, and if it was required, she would engage with the enemy, to the point where she was awarded a military cross for doing just that. So again, because the fact that the was an infantry officer, I suspect some of the infanteers amongst us just want to close and kill with our enemies, whereas the females at that stage, I know that they've moved on since then. That was a few years ago now, but she certainly brought something different to the patrol. She brought something different to the operation, which was absolutely vital to success. So for me, females serving in the front line, absolutely. Why was ever an issue? I don't know. But thankfully that's no longer the issue. I'm sure the CEO's got more target on that situation.
No, yeah. So in the context certainly of peace support operations, I think we need to be consciously aware that there may well have been both sexual and gender related violence, and there may still be that going on. And hence why you go on peace support operations to bring back quality and remove such things. And of course, having females integrated will certainly help with both an understanding of the empathy needed for that sort of thing, but also they will have an ability to connect with other females directly and help to assure them, perhaps get the information from them that we would need to be able to then do something about those acts of violence that would need to be dealt with. But certainly as well, if you're talking about peace enforcement operation, you will need to do things like searching of people and stuff like that, and cultural needs need to be considered there. And some cultures will not allow for a man to search a woman, and therefore you're going to need a woman to search a woman, and that's fine. And indeed, some cultures, unfortunately, are very stern against not operating with women, and there's that understanding needs to be had as well, because that could certainly unhinge what you're trying to do at the tactical level. But that's not to say that wouldn't work at the political level. We only need to look at diplomatic platforms across the world. There's a huge presence of females within them, and that's great. And why wouldn't we enhance that diversity of thought and capability within the lower levels as well as at the top political end as well. So there's certainly absolutely a place for women at every level throughout the force and in any sort of operation, whether it be peace or war fighting.
Thank you. So my next question is about the juxtaposition of using violence to end violence and the necessity of that sometimes.
If you start with me, again, it goes to that mantra. We train for war, we fight for peace. Is it fighting fire with fire? It depends on the situation, but we absolutely train for war, but we always fight for peace. I'm sure, again, commanding officer, sort of defer to the commanding officer, I'm sure he's got more to on that, because again, we mentioned at the start, the commanding officer's from an infantry background and I'm from a core logistics background, so I'm sure his view will be slightly different than mine, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to the purposes of an army, right? And I suppose if you were to take Von Clausewitz's view that that war is but an extension of politics by other means, it should be a last resort. If we have exhausted all other avenues, whether they be sort of political or diplomatic, by whichever means, then perhaps violence is the last resort to therefore enable peace to be sort of regained and re-established. So yes, absolutely a juxtaposition, isn't it? But sometimes a necessary evil, if you like. If you think about you want to lessen loss and suffering, sometimes you might need to go onto a war footing to then re-establish the peace and stability that is required.
And I guess alternatives which people suggest are unarmed forces or police. And I was wondering, to what extent could unarmed forces fulfill the role of the military in these operations?
It's fundamentally different, though, I guess, because the military is always an armed element. So I suppose that would be down to the political and diplomatic decisions in terms of what is the next step, what would help to bring about a peaceful resolution to an issue. Like I say, that could be their own host nation forces in whatever shape or form they are, or it could be the calling upon another nation or a coalition of nations to help to bring about peace and stability. So it's a slightly tricky one, really, because, like I said, we are an armed organisation. We are the political tool, if you like, to deliver that effect, the armed effect. So I guess it would, like I say, it would just come back to what is the political appetite, the diplomatic appetite, what other avenues have been exhausted. But the theory being that you would always wish for war to be the last resort.
Could we argue that we set the conditions for the NGOs to do the unarmed peace, and the delivery of medical logistic aid with the support of the military? I think that's been done in the past, and that's something that will be done in the future, will continue to be done.
I definitely think an important role of the military is in facilitating those bottom-up peace processes to occur.
I think where it gets complex is we've got some, I can't think of a better word for them, mercenaries who are going out there bearing arms in support of agencies delivering aid. And that's, I think, you get a confusion of what's hostile and what's friendly. I think there was a recent example of that a couple of weeks ago. The World Kitchen.
Yeah, forgive me. I mean, it's civilian security contractors effectively escorting the NGOs and therefore being targeted sadly targeted as part of that conflict. And there's a risk in that, isn't there? But I suppose you could look at it through another means. I mean, in terms of humanitarian assistance operations, which we have done in the past, a lot of those sort of interventions are unarmed. You only look at Gaza at the moment, the Air Force and actually our air dispatch logisticians delivering aid from from air platforms, arguably an unarmed activity, but undoubtedly they will be carrying arms for their own protection should it be required. So there are examples of some somewhat unarmed activity. You could argue sort of delivering a humanitarian assistance effect does lead towards building peace anyway, particularly if that peace has degraded. So, we may have arms with us for our own protection rather than broader.
And that also links back to the perception of the military from the local people and also from whoever it is that's taking part in the conflict. And the strength of the military as a show will come in part from them being armed, perhaps.
We mustn't forget those arms come with a really stringent set of rules of engagement, which soldiers and everybody else who's carrying those arms are absolutely drilled in, actually carry a hard copy in their pockets to those rules of engagement. They've got to be absolutely adhered to at all times. They can move, they can be changed to suit the circumstances, but those rules of engagement for those arms that we bear are absolutely imperative to what we do.
So I guess, would you be able to explain some of the ways in which the military supports NGOs a bit further?
So we probably wouldn't directly support an NGO on their request to us. It would need to be channeled through the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, for example, which we support regularly as a military. And indeed, the delivery of aid in Gaza was undoubtedly in support of the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office as well. So they may request through the political channels support of the military, which will then the departments will come to an agreement together, the Ministry of Defence and the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, in discussion, and therefore how do we help them deliver that effect? And that, I suppose, it's the same as military aid to the civil authority. If we're doing overseas aid to the Foreign and Commonwealth Development, it's military is normally seen as the last resort. But we may have the capabilities to help them to deliver the effect. Aircrafts and people that can dispatch stuff from the air, they don't have that. They can't contract that in. We can deliver that for the nation through other government departments should it be required, and they can then request to support that. So in a way, if the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office is supporting NGOs with, the delivery of aid to a point at which they pick it up and then they then deliver it, NGOs then deliver it directly to people that need it, we may be there assisting them in the movement of that aid. But certainly we probably, perhaps at the tactical level, we may assist with the handing out of water bottles and the aid, but generally that would be the sort of realms of the NGO to do. We might just help get the aid to where it needs to be, and then it can be delivered by the NGOs. So in terms of, we would certainly be supporting at arm's length, if you like, the NGOs rather than perhaps directly. And different NGOs will have different views. They won't want to be associated with armed sort of groupings. So they'll be like, we don't want to be directly associated with the army, and therefore they need to be a point at which we can perhaps get something to somewhere and then let them take on from there or deliver the aid accordingly.
So this is a big question about the ethics of intervening in itself and whether or not this is something which we have a responsibility to do.
I suppose at the end of the day, like I say, we have our purpose. We are here to defend, to be ready and to defend our own nation, and de facto, therefore, our beliefs and our culture and our way of living. And wouldn't we want other people to have the freedom to live in such a free and open manner as well? And therefore, if intervention by us is called upon to bring about that freedom, then I personally see no issue with that whatsoever. Like I say, that may not be to everyone's view, but it plays absolutely to our purpose. It is what we are there to do. Arguably, yes, a last resort, but if we do need to go to other places to help people that are there be able to live a free and fair lifestyle, then yeah, absolutely. I see no issue with us having to do that. And again, we just need to make sure that we understand the reasoning for it. We're doing it for the right reasons, and that we are there to come back to that. How does this finish? And that we therefore have that in our sights, and we are very rapidly establishing a mechanism to allow it to return to a safe and secure environment for the people that have been affected.
I think it's part of NATO. It's also a duty. One of our partner NATO countries is attacked or seem to be attacked, and we will intervene as part of the NATO construct.
And I think what you're talking about, freedoms and protecting people's freedoms, or intervening to help maintain people's freedoms, that links to a concept of positive peace, which is discussed in peace studies, of peace as more than just the absence of violence, peace as social justice. And I guess that's something which I see the military as being able to facilitate, and with those peace operations creating a space where other grassroots peace operations and peace building practices can come in, which maybe couldn't happen if there was still fighting going on or violence occurring between groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's about the re-establishment of the full security infrastructure as well around it. It's not just about re-establishing an army; it's the police and whatever other political services may be required, and it's whether we're providing a safe environment for reconstruction teams to come in and diplomats to come forward and help to rebuild those aspects of work they do, or even whether we use our own military police assets, or even bring in police from the UK to help with the rebuilding of policing in the region. It's like I say, it's that re-establishing that whole security architecture that can enable the continuation of peace or positive peace, as you said.
So I thought that draws on quite well to the example of Cyprus, which I think from what I've read seems like an example of negative peace. So there's the absence of violence due to the UN buffer between the two conflicting groups, but perhaps there's not yet been a transition to positive peace. Do you see in the future the move away from that UN buffer zone, and how would that be possible?
I think it's close. There's certainly a lot more dialogue between Turkey and Greece and the Cyprus situation now than there's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, there will only be a resolution to that politically. There needs to be a political, diplomatic resolution. I doubt very much that fighting will return. It's sort of, I suppose, a security stance there that is enabling hopefully a peaceful political and diplomatic resolution to the issue there. And perhaps NATO has a part to play in that as well in terms of membership and support to one another as well. So yeah, certainly there are positive steps in that direction, I would say, but I think it certainly sits well outside of the military sphere. It's certainly a political, diplomatic type thing.
But it's definitely an example of a time where armed forces have come in and allowed the facilitation of those political talks and discussion between groups.
Yeah,
it's also a generational thing as well. You get a lot of displaced persons from the Turkish side who moved out of their homes, their farms, their livelihoods, pushed back into the Greek part. Clearly, they're no longer with us. So as that generation moves away, then the peace process will be easier, because you've got no more displaced persons protesting outside offices, buildings, etc., etc.
So final question is, recently there's been talk about Britain currently being a pre-war generation. I was wondering what you had to say about that.
It's nothing new. We had the Cold War. I was a soldier of the Cold War, based in Germany. In fact, 90% of the British Army was based in Germany at that time, facing east, preparing for war, preparing for a Russian invasion. I don't think we're there yet, thankfully. I don't think we'll ever be there, but I think it's nothing new.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bang on there, Joe. That nothing has changed. Before World War I, we were a pre-war generation. Arguably, for a period after, we were a post-war generation, which quickly flipped back to being a pre-war generation. We were in Korea, and there's so many conflicts that have gone on since that we've always been effectively on a pre-war footing. It's just whether that war happens or not. And I just think it's all a bit closer to home at the moment. I mean, who would have thought in the 2020s we would be talking about a land war in Western Europe? That seems so far away from our sort of psyche and belief, but we are there now with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that poses an absolutely existential threat to the rest of Western Europe, which we are a bit apart of. So we definitely need to be, I guess, in the right mindset to be able to respond should that threat expand itself towards our shores.
Thank you both very much for your answers there.
No, thank you.
No, thank you for taking the time, to get us along and hear what we have to say.
I think it's been a great discussion about ending conflicts, being in peace operations or even other operations, the fight for peace, and the military's involvement in that fight for peace. So thank you both very much. Thanks also to you, our listeners, for joining us again. Do keep tuning into our podcast, as there will be more episodes coming out in the future on the Visualising War and Peace series. You can find out more by visiting our Visualising War and Peace website. If you have any questions about our work, please do get in touch. You can follow us on social media, just search for Visualising War, or contact us directly by emailing us at viswar@st-andrews.ac.uk. If you would like to support our project, please share and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you use so you don't miss an episode. And please do leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find the show. Our theme music was composed by Jonathan Young. The show is mixed by myself and Sophia Gertin. Thank you for listening.